We are survivors of the war. We come back to you, our people. And we are survivors of the war. We shared to wait you back. We walk for legs now gone, or lockstep still. We gaze for other eyes now only looking inward. We listen soft for comrades locked in silence. If we have minds less spent, we share unbending. And we who still care life now share this caring memory, that others not forget the dead who have no voice but us.
Welcome to Vet House Voice as we continue to outreach, educate, and chronicle events and activities of concern and interest to veterans, affected family members, and the caring community. We're going to come up with name tags so you can know how to pronounce my name and our guest's name after we do post-production on this. Speaking of guests, we have at least a longtime friend of me and a longtime friend of Vet House. Pam Melson, thank you for service, and welcome here and welcome home.
Thank you, David.
So, what'd you say?
Thank you, David.
You got kind of like a little accent in there. Southwest regional?
Correct. I was raised in West Texas and close to a place, El Paso, which my father, his wife, and my brother, and of course a lot of my friends still live there.
So you got nieces and nephews watching?
Yes.
So you're going to be the same size as Barney or as the president or the Queen of England or all those big fancy people. And if anybody says, how come why do you think you were on television? Remind them that you're on this side of the screen and they're on that side of the screen. Does that make you feel a little less uncomfortable?
Yes.
Yeah, you're a good friend. We did an interview maybe 10, 12 years ago.
Correct.
And I think it's time for another thing. A lot of things have changed in your life. What we're going to do, and we'll probably have to go to 2 episodes with this, because in addition to your background, some things have happened, and you've had some surgeries, and you've had both the necessity and the access to reach through some really good hospital care. So we want to talk about that. But before that, how was it like growing up in Texas?
It was a desert, and it gets extremely cold in the summer, and it's very hot in the summer and very cold in the winter. And there's one thing, you get to see the sunshine every single day. The sun is up every day. There's not much clouds.
Oh yeah, so how much snow is on the ground in the wintertime?
It doesn't stick. If it does snow, it doesn't stay. It occasionally does.
It's not like the Panhandle then, huh?
Yes, it is part of the Panhandle.
Is it?
Yes.
So you were in the Air Force, your military service?
Yes.
So you went to boot camp at
Lackland or
Lackland, which is in San Antonio?
Correct.
What color were the buildings?
These are gray.
Oh, when I was there, they were like baby puke green.
Pretty drab.
Oh,
very drab.
And we had to go out and pick. Well, were you allowed to smoke cigarettes when you were in boot camp, basic?
Yes, they were.
Oh, really?
A certain spot, you know.
Everything squared away and tucked under the hat and
yes,
spit shined. So how was the reception? When did you go in the military?
I enlisted in 1978.
So that was a time of flux. There was a lot of concern, a lot of bias. I know that the service had gender integrated while I was in the military. Shortly after they integrated, I was in the military. What was the attitude of your co-military? Can't say your buddies. Yeah, you can have female buddies, I guess, but your comrades. Did they have a separate troop or separate flight for women?
Yes, we had. That time it was all female flight. There was 50 of us, and
Mandatory, half from the East Coast, half from the West Coast?
That's what it seemed like.
Yeah,
Sure.
that is one of the beneficial things about having a universal military service, because you know, they pull you out of Texas and throw you in with somebody from New York or somebody from Seattle. You know, you don't have a picky choice to say, well, I don't like the way they act or the way they talk. You better get along. And I think that's a great harmonizer. It's a great blending machine. I think that was my experience. I kind of grew up pretty much ghetto, and I went there, and there were East Coast people that had really bad attitudes about California and Washington, and I had really bad attitudes about Pennsylvania and New York. So we had some real derogatory, not very couth things to say to each other, but we had to face each other, you know, probably 16, 18 hours a day with each other. So I got some friendship out of that, and I'm sure you did. How was service? Where were you assigned to after Lackland, after basic?
Lackland, I went to Rheinland Air Force Base in Germany.
That's a plum. How did you get that one? That's a plum assignment.
It is a plum assignment. I just put down on the dream sheet, you know, the places you wanted to go, and I wanted to go overseas, and that was one of the places. I believe it was like my third choice, and I got it.
I put down, for my first dream sheet, I put down Paris, France, and they sent me to Newfoundland.
Oh, wow.
No, there were 8 and 10 foot snow drifts up there. It was really awful. The people were wonderful. The terrain and the weather was not really good. So enough about me reminiscing. I'm quite a few years older than you, so I whine more about the memories. I pick out the arduous service ones to, can you cap this sort of thing. When you were in Rhine, Maine, what was your military code? What was your specialty, your AFSC?
That's when I started out in, it was just boilers. I did boilers, and I also did welding. It was just an offshoot. I
TIG, MIG, jig, electric, torch,
actually, it was
acetylene?
oxygen and acetylene. That's what I did, and some electrical, but mostly, you know, my primary job was boilers, but I did an offshoot, and I learned how to weld.
Did you learn to speak any German?
A little bit. Not that I can remember much of it now, but yeah, I did pretty well.
Did you learn to go to Oktoberfest?
Yes. I think that was like 2 or 3 months over there, and we learned about that.
Yeah. So that's right around Frankfurt, in that general area.
Correct.
Where did you get? Because I knew there were some day dogs that just stayed in the barracks wherever I was, TDY or PCS, and they'd just stay in there and not go anywhere. You know, that xenophobia that keeps us separated from all that culture. People were paying thousands of dollars to go over there on a vacation. Where'd you get to?
I went every weekend, just about every weekend. I went to a different place. You know, of course, I went to Paris, France, where you were, Brussels, Dachau, where Hitler's concentration camps were. Maybe that wasn't so lovely, but it was history. And the cathedrals.
Cologne or Cologne?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I think that's one of the more beautiful buildings in the world. Yeah. It's a shame it's not in a grassy area. It's like it's in the middle of a car park and cement aprons sticking out over the river.
Yeah. You know.
So what did you like best about your military? I shouldn't say your military service. Your worldwide traveling experience.
That was wonderful. That was great. I felt like I couldn't get enough. I still want to keep traveling and still want to keep going.
So you were in 20 years?
Yes, just about.
So where did you retire out of? Which base?
McClellan Air Force Base in Sacramento.
Okay. And so from Texas to Germany, and where did you go in between Germany and?
McClellan.
McClellan, California, yeah.
Germany, after Germany, was Edwards Air Force Base.
That's California.
Southern
again.
California.
Yeah.
And then I went to MacDill Air Force Base. It's Tampa, Florida.
Yeah.
And then I went to Korea, Osan Air Base.
What year was that?
1985 was Korea.
They were pretty much still building up the countryside. I think they'd closed off all the sanitation conditions that a lot of the Korean War vets remember. But I was over there last
You mean
fall.
the Benjo ditches?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, when I was there, they were opened.
That's all paved over. Everything
That's-
is, you know, you could drink water anywhere in the country,
That's a nice change.
and you could eat anywhere in the country. Yeah, the people. This was last winter. I went over with Al and his son.
That's
and,
wonderful.
Yeah, it was a really, really great trip.
Was it cold?
It was, no, it rained.
Oh.
And it was hot and it rained. And this was, I think, supposed to be winter. So it was down on the southern tip in a Yeselkoi, whatever if I'm probably mangling the name. All I got that I learned in Korean was Seoul and Kamsamida, you know, the thank you. And that was all I needed to know, I guess. People were very friendly, very appreciative of Americans. Old people came up on the street and thanked us. You know, our civilian clothes, but we stuck out anyway. And they said, thank you if you were in the military for coming over and saving our country.
Yes.
I was appreciating that.
Yes, the Koreans care a lot about the Americans. You know,
Yeah.
South Koreans, they cared a lot about us, and it can be kind of depressing at times to be over there. But the Korean people just help to change your attitude, and they're appreciative, and they really like the Americans. And it makes all the difference in the world. I made some great friends, you know, and had some great times there. And
Did you learn any martial arts?
yes, I did.
Which one?
Well, I did some Hapkido. I learned judo, and Hapkido complemented what I had already learned.
Really? Mm-hmm. Beneficial?
Beneficial, yeah.
Beneficial
Yes.
and good discipline then too.
Yes.
Where'd you go after Korea?
I got stationed at McClellan.
And that was it until
I
you
stayed
were
there
here for a lot of years then, huh?
I was at McClellan for about 8 or 9 years.
What was your shop?
By that time, it had changed to HVAC, you know, boilers and chillers.
In between the new clinic and the communications building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yes.
How'd you feel about the base closing? Kind of nostalgic?
Yeah. It was. I would have never believed it. It was
Yeah.
such an active base. Had so many people. It was very popular.
During the height of the Vietnam, I'm not sure what they call it now, a police action, an incursion. You know, in Vietnam they call it the American War. So, but during that time there were, I think, 6,200 military stationed there, and 22,000 civilians. Yeah, it was the largest single employer in Northern California.
I believe it.
It's a big business, this defense thing. I was going to say this war thing, but I've never been ashamed of serving. I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the policies of the country, but my obligation always was to serve the commander-in-chief, and what the people, if they didn't like it, they could get a new commander-in-chief.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some high points of your military life?
I, of course, traveled. I learned a lot. I think that's the biggest thing, is that I learned a lot.
What did you do any academic stuff while you were in? Any more schooling?
It seemed like I was always in school for something.
Yeah.
I was never not in school for one thing or another. And I think after that many years of schooling and everything, I started to feel a little bit burnt out because I'd had so much schooling.
Yeah.
That once I got out, I was like, "Ugh, I'm so tired."
So what was, do you have any idea what the proportion or the percentage of women in the military was at that time, or in the Air Force?
You know what? I'm not sure at that time, but it was a lot less than what they have now.
Yeah, oh,
Because,
yeah.
like now, it's a lot more women in the military. I don't know the percentage right now, but
So afterwards,
say.
did you have any connection? Well, I think probably episode 2 we could talk a little bit more in depth, but just passing over it, after you got out, after you retired out of the military, then you had access to hospitalization, or at least hospital facilities treatment at the Veterans Administration.
yes.
How long did it take to get that straightened out and arranged and into order?
Oh, as far as claims and things like that
Yeah,
that had
yeah.
happened, that I had acquired some injuries and
Yeah.
things like that that had happened in the military.
Yeah.
Initially, it wasn't too bad to get the initial percentage, 10% disability, 20%.
Where'd you get that originally at McClellan? VA,
yes.
when it changed to VA, then later Mather?
Yes.
Yeah. So there are veterans from, I know through the vet house, there are veterans still from Korea that have not accessed anything to do with the military for whatever reason. And there are 5 federal units or operations, separate operations, just in Sacramento County, Mather, McClellan. There's a couple of VA vet centers and a couple of VA outreach centers. So there's a lot of resources. If you were talking to a younger woman who had gotten just out of the military, how would you suggest she go in to get some resources or services from the Veterans Administration?
My suggestion would be to start out at Mather and go with the disability DAV, Disabled American Veterans.
So for the if I can remember right, those are congressionally based organizations, which means they're set up by Congress and they are mandated. They're service organizations, but they're also fraternal sorority organizations, each with a specific purpose or specific population. DAV, the Disabled American Veterans, pretty much is for veterans who have any damage incurred while during military service. And all of these organizations, you can join them in the organizational sense, but they also have service officers. You do not have to belong to the DAV or the VFW or AMVETS or the American Legion to receive services. So you went out.
That's correct. That's correct. I wasn't a member of the DAV when I initially started. But later on, I did join, but when I initially went in there, I didn't, a lot of things I just didn't know that I had to learn. And so I walked into the front doors at the hospital, and on the right-hand side, you sign your name up on the board, and they call you back, and they're very helpful and help you fill out the forms that you need to do to claim some of the things that happened, injuries you may have occurred while you were in the military.
Or even just to get copies of your records.
Oh yeah, that too, in getting licenses, discounts.
When did you discharge from the military?
I'm going to figure it out. 1995.
Okay, so they were still using that old alibi or that old canard. Well, there was a fire in St. Louis and the records were burned. They probably made that alibi to Civil War veterans.
I think they've said that several times.
Yeah, well, they told me that everything under M, the records had been burned, and I went, instead of going postal, I went congressional. And I found my military records had been given an R for some reason, which meant they were reposited in the World War II dead veterans. And I said, well, that's just sloppy paperwork. It's not, there's not a big mechanistic thing. I would think with the VA's extensive operational experience, they should be able to do things a little bit more quickly now. I haven't availed myself. I'm still having a long time getting my records, so that puts me back into the whining category. For veterans, there is a resource there, and sometimes you have to be a squeaking wheel to get resources. How was it for you to find?
Yeah, it was very difficult, actually. I have been filing for a good 10 years. Just kept filing, deny, kept filing, deny, kept filing, deny. And there's a resource center there on Howe Avenue. In fact, the address is 111 Howe Avenue.
1111.
It's 1111 Howe Avenue. And
that's a VA vet center.
Correct. And there was some, Edna was there, Gabby, and there's some other really helpful people there. And the one thing that I got told as I was filing, and I was really, at this time I was really sick. And the one thing I got told is, whatever you do, just don't give up. And at this particular time, I was filling out paperwork, even though I was sick as a dog, and I had kind of given up, but I remember those words, just don't give up. And that was the only thing that was repeating over and over in my head, just don't give up. And so like 10 years later, finally, somebody believed me, and I finally got some of the
I don't know if it
disability.
believed you. I think they finally, you got an access point where somebody did the job that they were supposed to do.
Correct. And they've
Yeah.
kept up with me, you
Yeah.
know.
So then they give you a primary care doctor,
Yes.
and then all of the subsequent. Do you want to talk about any of the services, medical services that you got from them?
Well, yeah, it's nice to know that you know, if unfortunately things happen and you might get hurt or injured or something like that. And I've had to be in the hospital a few times, and I haven't had to pay 1 red cent because of that.
So some of the access that is kind of a nice thing, and it's by entitlement of having served, and for I think the draft ended before you went into the military, didn't it?
Correct.
So that's the all volunteer. Part of it is a commitment and a promise, and part of it is an established entitlement that if you do your time, you know, you get the service reciprocal. And some of the surgery that you've had, I think you said in the last couple of years, was down in San Francisco.
Correct.
And that, I think UCSF is one of the top 6 medical hospitals, or teaching and medical hospitals in the country. You know, I haven't ever heard anybody down that. So how was your service? You went out to Fort Miley?
Yes, I went out there, and they were quick to handle my case, I had to have major surgery. I had to have a couple of major surgeries, and the doctors were, you know, outstanding. I had like 2 or 3 doctors. They had, you know, all up-to-date equipment. They had to use at one point they used a robot.
HAL 9000?
Yeah, I
remember
so.
who HAL was? 2001, The Space Odyssey. Oh,
like that.
there it goes, dating it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did the old story, and I remember some of the old medical help that I received. You know, it was barren walls. It was like being in jail, and the food was like almost like bread and water. And now, you know, they feed adequately and appropriately, and they also have a hotel facilities on the grounds of a number of the hospitals where you can check in preparation from a trip, or if need be, if you need to be accompanied by a service animal, or I guess a seeing eye person. You know.
You're talking about the Hoptail that's right there on the hospital grounds. It's very
hospital,
nice.
Hotel, yeah.
And they feed you too. You know, it's comfortable. It's right there on the ground. So if you have to have, like me, I had to have surgery the next morning and stayed there first. And
well, it makes sense, you know. And the overall thing is, if you serve the country, the country has a reciprocal commitment to serve you. You know, and that's a nice thing. Do you know anything about the Affordable Care Act?
I wished I knew more about it. It just seems like a lot of confusion to me.
If you are enrolled in the Veterans Administration system and you have your ID card,
Correct.
you don't have to do anything else.
Correct.
That's all. So there's nothing confusing about that.
That part there's not. I was thinking about talking about Obamacare, which is that.
Well, that's a sobriquet that people have given to politicize it.
Correct.
It is technically the Affordable Care Act, and you know, I'm not pro or con that. I'm establishing that any veteran who has served and has been discharged and meets certain basic requirements has the right of access without any further copay or any of those activities, because your service is your copay.
That's right. Thank goodness.
Yeah. So, were you under any baloney? Did they give you any baloney to entice you to enlist, or was it pretty much like they'd suggested to you?
Actually, I felt very fortunate to have been where I was. I didn't feel like I was fed a bunch of baloney.
How big was your hometown?
It's not really that large. I guess at the time it was probably know, maybe 50,000 at the most. It's
So
a
they
small
just
town.
had one recruiting station?
Correct.
Yeah. Did all 4 services or all 5 services use it, or did they just have a recruiting service for each?
They had basically one big building for all 4 services.
Yeah. You gotta say 5. The
5.
first troops into Vietnam, actually in combat area, were Coast Guard. United States Coast
right.
Guard was over there, you know, patrolling the waters and saving the maritime activities. So if you were that young kid again, what would you change about the entry or the advertising or just the basic, all the way into basic camp from enlistment? What would you change about it? What would make it more enticing or better for you?
At this point, I haven't really thought a lot about that. I had a good life, and I just felt fortunate at this point. When I was enlisted and I was asked questions like that, I'd make suggestions and stuff, and I've seen some of those suggestions come forward. So now that I'm civilian, I do what I can to help other veterans, especially if it's a new veteran and they're not aware of their benefits. Then they have those rights to the medical care.
Have you ever buddied system, you know, meet up a veteran that isn't sophisticated at all and taking them over to even just to bring them in to meet with the service officer, whether it's VA or the military service officer?
Sure, because they don't know.
Yeah.
Or they're scared to death, you know,
Yeah.
they're just physically shaking and scared
Or
to death.
they don't know, they're scared to death, or they've had bad experience under the former way people used to do things there.
Right.
I did a paper presentation for the American Psychological Association conference. I think it was 1974 or 1976. And the medical director came out from DC, and I asked him if they were doing anything for post-traumatic stress. And or I call it the psychological detoxification of the dysfunctional returned Vietnam veterans, which people say, what does dysfunctional mean? Now everybody, including the idiot pretend doctors, use that term. Anyhow, the whole thing about that was the medical director from VA Central said, well, we have no problems with the returned veterans, and if we did, we have adequate facilities. And I said, well, do you have separate and equal access and facilities for the female veterans? And he said, well, women have to have graduated from high school to come in the military. We've had no problem with the female vets. And I thought, that's really a naive statement.
I would say it was very naive.
Yeah, that was in the 70s. It was before you went into the military. But some of those things change quickly, but some of them change very, very slowly. And it's too bad.